Hello everyone. So this is a follow-up video, I guess, from my experiences from the first network test weekend. As you can see from the screen, it's over now. I just put the screen up for some background music. So I wanted to talk through three things. One, what I thought of the game itself, and in particular, things I've heard from other people, because I've had the privilege of chatting to a whole bunch of people on Discord, on YouTube, and on Twitter about their experiences with the game, and a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't personally see that people were doing. The second is the sort of general community response to it, and the third is a channel update, or more accurately, like quite a few people have said very nice things like, "Oh, you're back." Which I really appreciate, and I wasn't planning on doing lots of videos for Duelyst, but I have some thoughts that I will get to. So the first thing is the meta, part one. So my immediate thought was that Duelyst 2 would be mega aggressive, all face all the time. You're churning through lots of cards, you are trying not to overdraw all the time. You need to be playing 2 cards a turn for most of the game. That incentivizes lower curves. And you can't run people out of resources very easily, so getting big value minions is less worthwhile, and people have more answers to things. Broadly, I feel like that was true. But pleasingly, it did end up being a bit more nuanced than that. So my experience of the game was, I started out building, well, the first deck I built was literally just burn. Just burn high all face all the time. And then also this Magma aggro deck, that both of those underperformed on video. But they were, like, the first day on Friday, I was caning. I lost one game and it was to the mirror. It was another person that built a Mindsteel Magma deck. But I was playing against people trying to do, Deathwatch Abyssian and things like that, all the sort of stalwart favorites, people trying to play Arcanists and stuff, and I was just killing them over and over again. So something definitely shifted between me making those decks and first testing them, and then me making some videos, 24 hours later. And the main thing was that I was just playing against other people doing the same thing, right? People caught up to it. So I was playing aggro mirrors, where my first draft decks either didn't quite get there, like my Burn High deck didn't draw super well, the Magma deck was a pile, and so it didn't quite make it. The games were close, to be fair, but apart from the one game where the Vitruvian player played 4 cards on turn 2 and I just rolled over and died. But, they were close and fun and interesting, but didn't quite get there. So something definitely shifted. And then I didn't end up playing very much on the Sunday. I was busy. I played a couple of games, but I didn't spend a ton of time in the game. And I'm told from other people that actually it shifted again. People started running lots of healing to counter all this aggro, which was kind of my thought with the Heal Lionel deck that I built, which worked surprisingly well. And that slowed the meta down again, and then people started playing the big stuff. So we'd already seen some Ironcliff Guardians, which largely got away with murder in some of the videos I made, but are very punishable in this format. But apparently people are playing things like Red Singer. People are playing Zurel even. Cosvid on Discord told me that they'd seen, as well as those cards, they'd seen someone playing Pandora. I did see a Jack's True Sight in one of my games, off camera, I think. No, it was on camera. It was when I was playing Heal Liner. Yeah, we saw Jack's True Sight there, along with some aspects of the mountains. So there are people playing control decks. I guess the advantage of these cards is you can kind of use them to rebuild your hand a bit. If you're playing only one card in the turn, your hand size will gradually increase. But I think they do cost a lot of consistency. I actually didn't realize that there would be the 3 card starting hands. And initially I was like, oh, maybe you can play more expensive stuff then, because your hand's not going to fill up that quickly. The problem is that the 3 card hand is so brutal on your opening turns. Like, going first in Duelyst 2 is really bad, because you've only got 4 looks, I guess you got a mulligan, so you've got 7 looks to find a 2-drop. I guess that's not that bad. But it is still pretty easy to miss it. And I guess more to be fair, actually, now that I say it, that's pretty decent odds to find a 2-drop, whereas the kind of traditional 3-drop openings where you play multiple good cards are actually quite a lot less likely because they require 2-drops or 2, cards that fit together. Like I've had playing like Helm of Mechazor Pass on turn 1 doesn't feel too bad. But playing Helm of Mechazor Pass on turn 1 going second feels awful. Absolutely awful. And that's definitely happened to me a good few times. So actually, now that I think about it, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe as long as you run enough 2-drops, which everybody is, player 1 does get to do mostly normal things on their turn 1 most of the time. Whereas player 2 is less likely to be able to make the sort of player 2 plays, Golem Metallurgist into Ragebinder, or Silver God Knight into... What's that one? Draining Wave? The 1 mana deal 4 to a minion in your general, whatever that card was called. That card would be awesome in 2-draw, I think. Anyway, I digress. Point being, I did think the three card opening hands would actually leave a bit of space for people to play expensive cards, and it is true that you don't immediately mill if you miss your first turn, but it, I think, has the opposite effect in that for your first turn to be good, you need to run a lot of cheap cards, possibly even more so than you would otherwise. So yeah, because if you're seeing a 5-card opening hand, you're much more likely to be able to play something. You see 4 more cards, mulligans. So I really do think, strongly, even though people were managing to get some controlled decks out, some controlled cards out, that 2-draw does heavily incentivize these kind of low to the ground tempo decks. But it is really cool that we saw this meta evolution even within the course of a couple of days, which is something that, you see this in online card games, but I definitely remember this happening in Duelyst before, like when Ancient Bonds came out. And there was a qualifier tournament a few days later, and it was amazing seeing people develop decks and the meta shift in the couple of days after release. As people in this community are smart, man. You folks are clever. I mentioned Cosvid earlier in Discord. They told me about something really cool, which is they were playing with Tethermancer. The new Tethermancer, 4 mana 2/6, and it refreshes all the mana tiles on the board. And basically, it turns out that they were just using it as a tempo card. There's no combo application that it does, as far as I'm aware, anyway. But you can just play it when you're, positioning yourself such that you'll be standing on the mana tiles or near the mana tiles after they've been used. Play your Tethermancer, reload a bunch of mana. Now it's a 1 or 2 mana 2/6, which is quite good in this format. And they were combining it with Razorback and stuff, so they clear the board, and then have a 4/6 left over and stuff. It's pretty cool. So there are actually some interesting things that people are doing with the new cards. Speaking of new cards, I do stand by my assessment. I think that most of them aren't really going to be super effective. I think the card that most surprised me was Sunseer. They basically give it the change I always wanted them to give it, and the card, it is still a vanilla 2/4, more or less, but it does perform surprisingly well in this super aggressive metagame where there aren't that many Mechantals around. Lava Slash is not a thing. Yes, it dies to Holy Immolation, but you're also playing Lionar, so you can, you have Silver God Knights and stuff to play around Immo with. And the fact that it can heal you for 4 or 6, unless it's dispelled, in which case it dispel is actually really, really good. So I've been very impressed with Sunseer. Other than reworked cards that I've been taken with, there's nothing that really... Primordial Gazer is good. It's not really a rework, they just buffed it. But Primordial Gazer is very good now. That's a really, really good aggro card. The fact that it buffs Chassis of Mechazor is quite relevant, and Mechazor itself, of course, if you're in Dreamland. But yeah, buffing Chassis of Mechazor is pretty good. Mostly, though, it was the old cards and the unnerfed cards that continued to steal the show. Like Spell High was very popular. I played it myself. I saw other people play it, and I saw deck lists. Vanar seemed to get the short end of the stick, although I did see a couple of cool Vanar lists that people have built, and they do have some very well positioned cards. All their old removal is back, right? 1 mana Aspect of the Fox, 2 damage Chromatic Gold. And they still have Hailstone Prison, which is really good in 2-draw. God, Hailstone Prison is amazing right now, so you can build good Vanar interactive decks, maybe Control. I also saw very little AoE and no pings. That was the biggest thing, actually. Bloodtear Alchemist being 2 mana, no more Scorn, no Crater, no Cassiver BBS, no Raver BBS. You can just play 1 health minions in Duelyst 2. Which I actually quite liked. I did enjoy that it wasn't just a shame and an embarrassment to have a 1 health minion. And I definitely, I found myself doing like Flash Reincarnation, Sword of Mechazor a few times and just having like a 3-1 at the cost of 2 cards and then getting away with it. Poncho Mango told me that they played Maw, which I didn't realize. Maw, so the new Maw is a 1 mana 2-1. It deals 2 damage to a neighboring unit and gains +2 attack if it does so. I didn't realize it could target your general. So it's a 1 mana 4-1, and you take 2, which is pretty good considering there are no pings. Because people aren't playing Bloodtear and the others don't exist. Which is cool. I guess I would kind of like to see that be maintained. I think it would be interesting to have. I think you should still have some of those cards. Like, I think Blistering Scorn should exist, for instance, but Blistering Scorn, it's 3 or 4 mana, not 1, or not permanently attached to a general. I think the existence of a Duelyst meta where you can play 1 health minions and not feel like a complete idiot is definitely refreshing. Because that was basically never the case the whole time I was playing, due to Bloodtear and then later on the other various effects that did similar things. So I think, summing up, I think there's quite a lot of reason to be excited about the way Duelyst 2 will play out, even though, I definitely count myself as a 2-draw cynic. And I don't know if it'll work out long term. I still don't. I genuinely think 2-draw has... So, in Magic the Gathering, right, there's a card called Howling Mine, which basically makes the game into 2-draw. And then there's a bunch of other variants of the effect. Some stronger, some weaker. Some of them let your opponent draw first, some of them let you draw first. But they're fun. They're fun cards to have. It's like Spelljammer, right? It's like playing Spelljammer. But usually they're like weaker cards and they're not creatures. Those cards are fun, and I've even designed, for those of you familiar with Magic, I have a cube, which is like a custom set, basically, where there's permanent 2-draw. So I have a 2-draw Magic set. But it's designed in a very specific way. It's not very creature-focused, and you're not expecting to run people out of resources. Instead, it's designed around, people can deliver combos and assemble these, weird, complicated synergies, and then also have access to very powerful interaction. And so the gameplay is more about finding these inflection points in each person's strategy where you can insert that one thing that disrupts them long enough that you can do your thing instead. Because you're both going to have 7 cards in hand the entire game a lot of the time. So I think that's very difficult to reproduce in games that aren't exactly Magic the Gathering. And I think that's going to be a problem in Duelyst 2. I do think that 2-draw is not necessarily something that is sustainable long term. Even Artifact abandoned it. They used to have 2-draw and they stopped, I think. It is something that is unique and fun and gives good flavor. I kind of almost wonder if there should be a separate 2-draw queue or a seasonal thing where 1 week of every 4 it's 2-draw or something like that. Just keep it special so it's exciting. And you've got your 2-draw decks that you bust out when it's 2-draws, and then after you go back to playing 3-drops and 4-drops and 5-drops, and killing them with Blood of Air like a sensible person. So I think, but despite my misgivings, I did enjoy it a lot. I think I saw an opinion ventured that I do agree with, which is that games either end very, very quickly because people are playing super aggro decks, or they go on for ages because neither person can easily run the other out of resources. And I think that dovetails into a thing I felt where this game, as it stands, doesn't really have a lot of win conditions. Like, there aren't super great ways to just kill somebody outside of Divine Bond or Mega Aggro. Like, big minions aren't super good. They are very punishable. Like, yeah, things like Pandora and Dark Nemesis exist, but you can just kill them and play another spell in the same turn. And they don't defend you very well. I guess Pandora kind of does, but I think it's relatively difficult to make those cards really work compared to the sort of win conditions that we had, in later patches in Duelyst, or even in original Duelyst in one draw. Once one original release Duelyst, obviously this is original Duelyst, but in like old one draw Duelyst, core set launch Duelyst, something like a Dark Nemesis was a reasonable win con because you could just trade with your opponent's removal until they didn't have any, play your Dark Nemesis, and then eventually it would kill them, or whatever other creature. You can't do that in 2-draw because they always have more resources and they can dig for more answers. So unless you're like seriously thinning their deck, or the game goes on for a long time, it's going to be very difficult for that to be an actual reliable win condition. I guess that's why it's cool that people are playing Red Singer, because even if it dies, it's still a big tempo swing. Because you can kill one, or if you have a Dream Gazer, someone told me about this, you can get two things in one turn. I think that's really cool. Singer plus Dream Gazer, that's sick. But yeah, besides that, like, there aren't, without Bloodborne spells, you don't have that kind of like build around strategy aspect to the heroes. You don't have the ability to, like, Fae obviously has a built-in win condition in Warbird, right? Warbird is a win condition, it kills your opponent. And then things like Ragnora and Reva can keep presenting threats and exhaust your opponent's ability to answer them just using their Bloodborne spell as well as their actual cards. Which you don't need that as much in 2-draw because you can keep presenting threats because you're drawing 2 cards a turn, but also your opponent's drawing 2 answers a turn, whereas in, original Duelyst that was not the case. And there was only one hero that could answer a Heartseeker or an Egg every turn with their own Bloodborne spell, so it was genuinely like a thing you could use to build up a win condition over the course of a drawn-out game. And then you'd also have build around heroes like Kara that had sort of combo, like Kara plus Embla was basically a combo, Kara plus Jack's True Sight, things like that, Kara plus Winter's Wake, Ice Age, Winter's Wake's the one that animates the walls, Ice Age, Kara makes that stronger, and protects him from Plasma Storm, Kara plus Pandora, same thing. Bath obviously builds up his damage stacks. Starhorn turns the game into 2-draw, so he can play like a 2-draw deck with a super low curve and lots of aggro against people who aren't prepared to take advantage of it, so it imbalances the game, allowing him to leverage the strengths of that strategy instead of it just being the sort of perfectly balanced opposing force. So I think the game's dragging out will also become an issue. And unless answers are made a lot more specific, I think that's going to continue. And I'm not sure that's a great way to go down. Like, Magic tried that. They tried making threats that were really difficult to answer for a while, and it just ruined Standard, the competitive format of like recent cards, because you just couldn't kill everything. So it was like, oh, your opponent puts a ridiculous card down. You're like, well, none of these 3 removal spells in my hand kill it. Yes, I die. I think you want like things that are resilient but not super high impact, or things that are high impact but not super resilient. Not both. But that's very hard to do, especially in games where you don't interact in your opponent's turn. Games like Magic have way more design space for doing that. And I think that's much more difficult in games like Duelyst and Hearthstone, where it's minions can trade into each other, and so it's difficult as it is to just play a threat and have it not die when you're behind. So yeah, I think summarizing that, 2-draw I think is fun. I don't know if it's fun long term, and I don't know if the dev team are kind of planning to stick to their guns about it. I think that could cause problems. I don't really want Duelyst 2, personally, obviously I have no say in it, but I don't personally want Duelyst 2 to be beholden to like old community bugbears. I know 2-draw is important to some people. I know, you know, like avoiding RNG is important to some people in the community. Like, obviously these things made for big arguments on Reddit and stuff every time. But like, Bloodborne spells as well. Apparently some people didn't like those. But like, those were added to the game for good reason, right? You know, not that Duelyst or Counterplay were perfect. Right, no game is perfect, but I think there's a good reason to take the leap of switching those mechanics, especially in defiance of vocal sections of the community, right? The sort of easy path is to just keep going. So they must have had a good, strong reason for switching to 1-draw, adding Bloodborne spells and so on. I think, I have my opinions on what those reasons are, but I can't know without asking. If any devs are watching this, tell me. I'd love to know. If it's something you're happy to talk about, of course. So I hope that the Duelyst 2 devs aren't so beholden to like not doing what Counterplay did, that it gets in the way of making the game better, or even like seeing problems with the system as is. Because I'm sure there's ways to make 2-draw work. It probably can be done, but I think it has to involve a very different card pool from what we have now, and I don't really have a good idea of what that looks like in a game with no like response system like in Magic. Maybe it ends up like Hearthstone, which Hearthstone is basically like friendly looking Yu-Gi-Oh at this point, where like most of the good plays you make wipe your opponent's board and leave a big body behind, or multiple big bodies. There are combo decks that can, kill your opponent out of hand with no interaction easily, if they are allowed to get to a certain point in the game. And only relatively lightweight tech cards to beat them. Hearthstone has enough card draw in it that it is basically 2-draw. You do have to put the cards in your deck, but they are very efficient. Maybe that's the way to go. Because actually, Hearthstone has its problems, but this kind of gameplay does actually work for its mechanics in a way that I played my minion, your turn, didn't. Especially in hindsight. Like, they released a classic Hearthstone ladder a year or two ago with like the original core set. And I was like, man, I'm so excited to like play this nostalgic release. I watched them people play it and like, this is naff. This is just completely naff compared to, 2020 Hearthstone or whatever it was. That the game has evolved so much. Maybe that's the direction Duelyst 2 can go in. Don't know. But I'm interested in seeing it. Right, I feel like I've talked way longer than I anticipated on just the first section. Classic. Part 2. Community reaction. This will be shorter, I guess. I had completely not expected how much of an outpouring of support there was for Duelyst 2, and I really, really, really enjoyed how much conversation was happening around it. I heard Mogwai was pulling in like 1,400 viewers on Twitch or something ridiculous like that, like just huge numbers. Really, really good. I've been surprised and really, overjoyed at the amount of engagement my videos have gotten, and from how many people are like really keen to see the game come back to my channel and to the world in general. I wasn't expecting to get into. I wasn't planning on getting into Duelyst 2. As I said in my first video, Duelyst does to a large extent represent a closed story of my life. Right, it had beginning, a middle, and an end. It's a completed thing, and going back and starting from scratch doesn't necessarily appeal to me. I genuinely at this point do not know how long I'd played Duelyst 2 for, or Duelyst.gg. I haven't been playing that much Duelyst.gg. I think there's only so much of patch 1.96 I can carry on with, you know what I mean? But at the same time, this experience has really made me want to. And the number one thing that I had missed so much was just talking about the game with you lot. Like, being in Discord, both in my Discord and Brunion's Discord, when this every day the spoilers came out and people would post them and we'd chat about the cards, the revamped cards. Even if we were cynical about them or whatever, it was still really fun to just look at what was going on and have new cards to evaluate and, or, you know, compare them to these other cards that may or may not be in the game. Like, that was so much fun. I really missed that. And I also, yeah, unexpectedly really enjoyed playing it. I played quite a lot more than I was expecting to. My sort of approach was not to force it. I didn't want to be like, right, I need to jam loads of Duelyst. I think that would have made me miserable. I made videos because I wanted to, and I didn't sort of make them until I didn't force myself to make them. I actually made 3, and then I felt like making another one, even though it was like 2 a.m. And I should have been in bed, but it was a Saturday night, who cares? But then I didn't make any the Sunday night. I wasn't feeling jumping back in and making content when I'd work the next day, so I didn't force myself to do it, and that ended up being the right approach, being really, really enjoyable for me. Maybe that'll work for other people, because I've definitely heard the same comment from quite a lot of folks around the community, like, you know, it's really difficult to just start a novel again from the beginning when you already know the ending, you know, like, and, you know, there's the fear of being hurt again, or of having filled that space in your life with other things since, and now not having any space. So if that's, you know, if you're having thoughts like this, like, you are definitely not alone. There are lots of us, myself included. And I think plenty of us in the community are really unsure about how much we want to actually play of this new game. But I think it was a bit of a perfect storm of, like, the spoilers and the short time frame that it was available. They just got everyone like, yeah, I can play for 2 days. That's not a commitment. And I don't have to unlock any cards. I don't have to grind. I don't have to be without my old collection. Let's just go. Let's just jump in and play. And it did gangbusters. Like, it was amazing. Everyone was in and it felt great. So, like, I don't know if that would last long term. I don't know how, you know, people will probably jump in and then drop off, or some of us will stick to it, some of us won't. But it was very special, and, like, to everyone I spoke to about it, and presumably we'll keep speaking to about it after this, thank you. It was a real joy, a real and genuine joy. It's been awesome. I guess that dovetails into, you know, talking about the future and stuff. That dovetails into my channel. So I haven't streamed since Duelyst shut down, and I've just made occasional, like, basically review videos that some of them people have watched, some of them people haven't really watched. I think at one point I tried, there's been a couple of games I've made like more than one video of, and there's definitely been a fall off. And I never made the part 3 of Legends of Runeterra that I promised, because I stopped playing it. So I do apologize for that, for anyone who was actually waiting for my my follow-up opinions on the constructed side of things. It wasn't helped that I made a deck and then they nerfed it, so I put all my crafting resources into building something as a new player, and then it went away. So that was kind of like a big part of why I actually stopped playing. But I was trending in that direction anyway. I wasn't super enjoying it. And I hear the limited game, the expeditions are gone now as well, which is, that kind of takes away a lot of the draw for me. I digress. Point is, I've not been making a lot of content in general. My YouTube channel is largely Lane Fallow, outside of me occasionally wanting to enthuse about something. And, you know, that's sort of fine, right? Like, it's I have a job, I have a full-time job, I have lots of other hobbies. I'm not a professional content creator, and I can't reasonably hold myself to the standards of one, even a professional sort of part-time content person. However, I did really enjoy making these videos again, and especially with the way I actually made them. Like, streaming is a fair bit more work, but sitting down, talking at the computer for half an hour, and then pressing end recording on OBS and just going directly to the YouTube upload is, you know, not having to like edit, cut long stream videos up and stuff. Way easier. So what I am considering doing, and I want to stress that like this is not a long-term commitment, this is not a promise, this is just like what I'm thinking of doing, because a lot of folks have asked, is I want to try and make maybe like, I want to play some Duelyst.gg in the meantime. When Duelyst 2 comes out, I will definitely make something for it. Probably something similar to what I've done this week, like a burst of content, and then we'll see how the mood takes me forthwith. But I think what I'm going to do is, like, for a couple of months or something, I don't want to specify an exact time frame, and I may go longer, I may go shorter. It, again, really depends on how I feel. But for a little while, I might just make, like, one video a week or something of me playing Duelyst.gg and just going back to, like, okay, here's this deck I loved 3 years ago. How does it play? Helgen's made some changes to the card pool, so that, you know, the balance has been slightly affected. But when Duelyst.gg was launched, I jumped in and built Wanderer and had a good time. Again, because I've played that patch to death, I don't know how much value there would be in doing that long term. But I like the idea of doing, like, basically just for nostalgia's sake and to kind of keep this community momentum ticking over a little bit. Not so much for the engagement, because I don't make any money from this. I mean, obviously, people watching my videos and saying nice things about them are great. It gives me the warm fuzzies, but I'm not doing this for the, you know, because I have to build my brand or whatever. Like, I build my brand for 40 hours a week. I make videos because I like doing it. But generally because something about that appeals to me, and I've also really enjoyed this push of, like, everyone just coming together and be like, hell yeah, Duelyst, this is awesome. So something to, like, I don't know, help tide people over until we get more Duelyst 2. And also just to boost Helgen's work a bit, because, you know, they've just made this whole thing by themselves, and realistically they can't necessarily compete with Duelyst 2. I mean, they legally can't, but also they, you know, Duelyst 2 is an entire team, and they have, like, new music, and the UI works nicely and stuff, but, like, Helgen made a pretty clean and uncomplicated passion project for something that, you know, people can just go and play, that is like it's like a time capsule. I know they made some balance changes, but it's like a time capsule of Duelyst as it was. Whereas Duelyst 2 is, you know, overhauling it and starting again and doing, you know, introducing tutorial and stuff. I think it might be nice to just highlight that effort for a couple of months and then see how we feel, how people respond, and, you know, whether I'm enjoying making regular content again, and go from there. So I think what I'm going to do for now, to start with, is I'm going to do about one video a week for about a couple of months. They probably won't be mega, like, practiced or polished. I'm not playing actively, and I don't want to push myself to play actively. So you'll probably see me make a bunch of mistakes. But the main idea, I think, is just to, like, give people something to watch. I'll you know, try and be warm and entertaining and nostalgic. And, like, hey, look at this cool deck. And maybe, like, you know, if people have deck requests, I can play them and stuff like that. Because I always liked doing deck requests, but I got sort of a little bit burned out on playing the ladder back in the day. And I just kind of got very set in my ways on, like, these are the good cards and these are not. And while largely that was correct, you know, the years since have maybe loosened the ossifying a little bit. I'm interested in exploring a little bit more and seeing, what did I miss back in the day? What were people doing that I never saw? So, yes, I think that's the plan. I'm going to do a couple videos a week, or, one video a week for a couple months of me playing Duelyst.gg. And then there will be more stuff for Duelyst 2 at some point. Obviously, I don't know when that's going to happen, because I don't know when Duelyst 2 is going to happen. But I've really enjoyed getting back in touch with the Duelyst community through this, and I've really enjoyed the kind of upwelling of nostalgia and joy and support for the game, and sort of being able to ride that wave a little bit by dint of my position within the community. And I've also been really appreciative of everyone who's said kind things about it. So I hope you also enjoyed this 35 minutes of me rambling at a camera. Not hardly unusual for my channel, I guess, but yeah, just something I wanted to put together to collate both my own thoughts and what I've heard from other folks, and let people know what I'm going to be doing in the near future. So if you made it this far, thank you for watching or listening, and I will see you soon. Have a good one.